In front of people all over the world, the most powerful person in the world just told a living head of government that his country lives because of us. And that leader's popularity didn't fall, it went through the roof. Because this story is still making waves, I want to tell you what happened in Canada. They're going somewhere no one saw coming. Allow me to set the scene. The 20th of January 2026 in Davos, Switzerland. The World Economic Forum is where world leaders, billionaires, central bankers, and the people who plan the world economy get together. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, is standing on that platform. He doesn't talk about small things. He doesn't say nice things. He starts by saying that the rules-based international order, which has been in place since World War II and has controlled global trade, diplomacy, and security, has gone through what he calls a rupture. This is different from a transition or a slowdown. He was talking about someone that everyone in the room knew, but this is where things get tricky. He didn't say who it was. Whenever he talked about the end of what he called American hegemony, he did so as if it were a natural event, something real and measurable that just needed to be recognized so the world could move on. His message to the leaders that the world's middle powers, countries that are important but not superpowers, was that they needed to work together. Then he gave the line that led foreign offices from Brussels to Tokyo to light up. We're on the menu if we're not at the table. People in DVOS usually give short, polite praise that is political. But this time, they gave him a standing ovation. Finland's president said it was one of the best talks given in the country in years, praising how deeply it looked at how the world is changing. The head of NATO said that the speech showed that Canada is once again a major world power. The previous ambassador of Canada to the UN said that he had never seen such a global response to a speech in all of his years of work. Not an email or tweet, but a 30-minute speech. I'm about to tell you something that will change everything because Trump spoke to some of the same people the next day in the same building. And in a way that has become his political trademark, he answered directly and emotionally. He said, and I want you to hear these exact words, "The United States keeps Canada alive." Mark, keep that in mind the next time you talk. Allow that to land. At the World Economic Forum, which is the most important foreign business event in the world, the President of the United States told the Prime Minister of Canada that his country only exists because of American kindness. What a rude and arrogant answer that was. Carney was not hurt by it. He wasn't scared. That's not what it did. The most recent polls from Canada's most reliable research group, the Angus Reid Institute, shows that 60% of people agree with Carney. That's 8 points more than his previous best. The best number he's had since taking office. His Liberal Party is now 3 points ahead of the Conservatives in the national vote, with 41% to 38%. The man threw down the gauntlet in the global stage and got punched back by the leader of the world's most powerful country. He came home more popular than he has ever been. That's not even the whole story, because Trump said more than one thing. Trump took down Carney's invitation to his so-called Board of Peace, a diplomatic forum, by social media post over a speech after he left Davos without meeting with the US president, which was a clear choice. He then threatened Canada with 100% tariffs over a trade deal Carney had signed with China the week before the Davos address. The stress was coming from everywhere, Carney and us. He talked on the phone with Trump and said it was a great call. Then he went back to Canada and told the people there that their country needed to depend less on the US for its economy. Not in secret, not quietly, but in public. In the same week, Trump was warning of a terrible outcome from tariffs. Jean Chrétien and Stephen Harper, two past prime ministers who have been political rivals for a long time and are liberal and conservative, sat together at a public event and praised Canadian unity. With her 92-years-old eyes, Chrétien said out loud what many Canadians are thinking right now. He said that this was the start of the end of the American empire. They were sitting right next to each other, and he didn't move. Most news stories about this story got this wrong. It wasn't just a speech, it was the clear beginning of a plan that Carney had been working on behind the scenes since March 2025 when he took office. Before DVOS, before the long applause, before the videos that went viral, he had already been away for almost 60 days since becoming prime minister. Not on vacation or for official meetings, but on business trips, investment summits, or building relationships. Before he told everyone about the alliance, he was putting it together, It also made a trade deal with China the week before Davos. The time wasn't a mistake. Carney went to the World Economic Forum with a new trade deal with China. He then told a global crowd that middle powers needed to create a third path that wasn't controlled by either Washington or Beijing. He was basically telling everyone that Canada had already started the move. The speech wasn't the first step in the plan. It was the news. After that, Trump saw this happen. Also, telling someone that they can do well without Donald Trump is not something he likes. Almost right away, he spoke out against the China deal, calling it risky and threatening 100% taxes. The fact that he used the word not grateful shows how the current U.S. government feels about its relationship with its northern neighbor. So he didn't go to the official meeting in Gaza with Carney because of a speech that didn't even call him by name. It gets worse for Trump now. That is, while all of this was going on, new polls from Reuters and Ipsos showed that Trump's approval rate was falling to 38%. Almost as low as it got during his second term. His numbers on immigration, which are a big part of who he is as a politician, hit a new low. In the meantime, 58% of Americans said that the federal government was going too far with its immigration regulations. In the same week, Trump got into a very public fight with the Prime Minister of Canada. There were signs of stress in his own base. One thing about Carney's move in China that no one has really explained is this. He wasn't saying he was going to leave the United States for good. He was letting Canada know that it had choices. That's a totally different stance from any Canadian Prime Minister in the last few years. The relationship between Canada and the U.S. has been based on the idea that Canada needs the U.S. more than the U.S. needs Canada for many years. Carney's whole DVOS plan, which didn't involve military force or economic warfare, was meant to challenge that idea through diplomatic architecture. Sources now state that after Carney's speech at Davos, he had a direct phone call with Trump that was described in public as very good. During the call, Carney reaffirmed Canada's decision to stay on its own path. He told reporters that the link between Canada and the U.S. was still important and should be protected, but that Canada needed to keep moving away from relying on American trade. He had to keep the friendship going and never shut the door, but he also had to make it clear that Canada has a plan B. The numbers now show that Canadians like this way of doing things. Polls show that most people of all ages and both sexes are happy with Carney's job. 2/3 of men and women over 54 agree with this statement. Historically, one of the most difficult groups to pick. But this is what no one is talking about. Trump isn't really Carney's biggest political threat. It's not from the other side. Because there is a gap between the world story and what is happening in the United States. Because in Edmonton, people with protest signs were outside of City Hall while NATO officials and Finnish leaders praised Canada's Prime Minister. They weren't many, but they were there. And their message wasn't hard to understand. The cost of food is still going up. There is still a housing problem. There are still problems that need to be fixed, like the high cost of living, the housing crisis, and the general feeling that the system isn't working for regular people. These issues didn't go away just because Carney gave an inspiring speech in the Swiss Alps. There was a woman at a protest in Edmonton who said exactly what a lot of people in Canada are thinking. Food prices are going up, even though he said he would drop them. Now, financial experts who follow Canada's political cycle are saying in public that Carney has about 6 to 9 months to turn the momentum from Davos into real results at home before Canadians start looking for other choices. The time is now. The question is whether the world stage he's created will give him the room to breathe or whether it will hurt him. This part kept me up last night. The cheers are real. It's true that 60% agree. The world's attention is real. But if you take a step back and look at what's really going on in Canada right now, not in Davos or NATO briefing rooms, but in Alberta and Quebec, you can start to see something that could bring down everything Carney just built faster than anyone thought possible. I want to start in Alberta. While Carney was getting a standing ovation in Switzerland, a referendum question was officially passed by the province's electoral authority in Western Canada. People are being asked, do you agree that the province of Alberta should leave Canada and become its own independent state? Sign-ups started on January 3rd of this year. By May 7th, they need 197,232 signatures to get the question on the provincial vote. a vote on split in the province of Canada with the most oil and gas. What I'm about to show you changes everything. Documents and confirmed accounts show that the Alberta Prosperity Project, the group behind this referendum, has met with U.S. State Department officials at least 3 times since April of last year. A meeting with the U.S. Treasury Department is allegedly being planned to talk about a possible $500 billion line of credit that could help Alberta pay for its move to independence. $500 billion in cash on hand to cover the costs of leaving Canada. When asked about this in public, the U.S. Treasury Secretary said that Albertans are very independent and that Alberta is a good partner for the U.S. Take a moment to think about that. The same country whose leader is openly threatening to destroy Canada's economy. Carney just spoke out against the government in public, but behind the scenes, they are meeting with a group that wants to split off one of Canada's most important provinces to talk about money. By any measure, it is a planned squeeze. Pressure from the outside and the inside. On the other hand, British Columbia's leader didn't hold back. He said those talks were very bad and against the law. And Prime Minister Carney had to stand in front of the cameras and tell reporters that he expects the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty, not when it comes to a faraway ally, but when it comes to his own country's territory, his own province. He had just given a global address about sovereignty and the dangers of outside pressure on smaller nations. It gets worse now. The leader of Alberta is playing a tricky game. In public, she says she doesn't want to separate, but her government passed a law that dropped the number of signatures needed to start a provincial referendum from hundreds of thousands to just 177,000. She has let the petition process happen. Voters in her own party strongly back independence. Most of them are either leaning toward or firmly in favor of leaving. At the same time, she's trying to calm down moderates and keep the independent supporters in her group motivated. She's doing this at a time when the U.S. government is calling Alberta a logical partner. At the moment, polls show that about 28% of Albertans would choose to split. That's not the edge of things. That's a minority. That is an action. The paper must be turned in by May 2nd. Quebec is the next one. The leader of the province's nationalist party, Quebecois, is currently ahead in the polls, just before the provincial election this fall. He has said very clearly that if he wins, he will hold a third vote on Quebec's independence. Last year, Canada's own intelligence service said in public that foreign enemies might try to meddle in both the Alberta and Quebec referendums by spreading false information, putting pressure on governments with money, and hacking into websites. On the record, they said it out loud. This is what no one is talking about. There is a separatist petition that ends on May 2nd in Alberta, an election in Quebec in the fall, and the federal government is holding on with a minority. All of this is happening at the same time, so Carney is facing a battle on 3 fronts. At the same time, there was a crisis of national unity, foreign credibility, and economic pressure at home. His government could fall at any time because there isn't a majority in Parliament that would give him the power to deal with any of them. A vote of no confidence that is caused by the opposition, a debate over the budget, or one mistake. And now Canada is running for office again. And that quick election would not be held to the cheers of people at Davos, but instead in Alberta, where food prices are going up and the time to vote for a referendum is running out. Political experts who pay close attention to how Canada is run have harsh opinions. There's a window in Carney. There is a window there, but it's not very big, and the things that could shut it down are real. They are taking place, have been recorded, and have their own schedules. I want to tell you the truth about what I believe is going on here because I believe this story needs more than just a headline. Carney has really done something strange. That's exactly what I mean. Carney went into the most watched room in global finance and called out the problem. This happened at a time when most Western leaders were either giving in to pressure from Washington, ignoring it, or making a big deal out of it. He used the correct word to describe the end of the post-war order. He suggested a different approach. He told the world's middle-sized forces to work together to make something new before they lost the power to do so. It worked all over the world. It really did work. The leaders of NATO are now telling everyone that Canada is back. People around the world who have spent their whole lives watching multilateralism fall say that his speech was one of the few times when everything made sense. His own polls went from being quite good to being extraordinary. He leads the country as a whole. The resistance is going to look at its leaders. It's clear that this is a political success story by any standard measure. But Carney's time to turn that success into something long-lasting is running out faster than the news stories say. It's now being said out loud by financial experts who follow the political cycles in Canada. He has about 6 to 9 months left before people in Canada, who are still having a hard time with rising prices for food and housing and a shaky economy, start looking for other solutions. The kindness from Davos is real. The numbers for approval are real. Well-being and approval scores are not the same as results, though. And when there is a minority government and no set date for the next poll, the results are everything. This is what no one is talking about. Trump isn't the one who could slow down Carney's progress. It's not from the conservatives who are against it. It's the difference between the story Canadians are proud to tell the rest of the world and the life they live at home. The Edmonton woman with the sign about food prices is not wrong. In Carney's eyes, she is not a threat. In fact, she is the person his idea needs to reach. The message that is getting through to her right now is that things are still expensive and the Prime Minister spends a lot of time in foreign cities. That gap can be closed, but we need to shift our focus from building foreign architecture to achieving policy wins at home. And it has to happen while 3 really important pressure points are being dealt with at the same time. The limit for petitions in Alberta is May 2nd. There will be a provincial election in Quebec this fall that could bring in a separatist government, and there is a minority parliament that could call an election at any time. Finally, I want to talk about the Alberta part of the story one more time because I think most people still don't understand how important the US part of that story is. People who want to break away from Canada are talking with officials from the same government that Carney just named in public as the biggest threat to the rules-based order of the world. Reports say that they are going to talk to the U.S. Treasury about a $500 billion line of credit to pay for their freedom. And the U.S. Treasury Secretary is saying in public that Alberta is a good partner for the U.S. The problem isn't just keeping the country together. This is an issue of foreign policy that looks like a problem in the United States. It's the outside pressure that Carney told everyone about that's coming up in his own country. To date, data shows that about 65% of Albertans would choose to stay in Canada. That's a pretty big majority. The petition might not even reach its goal. However, if 28 or 30% of voters in a big Canadian province choose to leave, even if the vote is not binding, that creates its own weight. The markets and the foreign media both respond. The U.S. government responds since it has already shown it will use the pressure as a bargaining chip. After all of this, it's not clear that the Prime Minister is in trouble, not even close. The picture shows a Prime Minister who has built something real and important, a real change in Canada's global identity at the exact time when the old identity was no longer possible. That is something the First Order did politically. But the picture also shows a man working in a very small hallway. There is a minority government, pressure from 2 different separatist groups, a housing crisis that hasn't gone away, a foreign enemy that is threatening tariffs and paying for the country to fall apart, and the political clock that always shows that the minority government is closer to midnight than the calendar says. That's right, Carney has real momentum, the kind that most politicians spend their whole lives trying to build. What he does with it is the real tough question, because having motion isn't a plan. It's not a budget to get global support. There is no way to fix a food bill in Edmonton with a standing ovation in Davos. The next 6 months will give us the answer we need, not this week's news. And I'll be there for every step. I really want to know what you think about this. This is the question I keep coming back to. As the voice of the middle powers, Mark Carney has made Canada stand up to the most aggressive American government in decades. His approval ratings are at their highest point of his tenure. But time is running out for separatists in Alberta. It is still true that the cost of living in the UK is rising, and this government could fall at any time. So, is the world stage his best political tool right now? Or is it taking his attention away from the fights he needs to win at home? Where do you think this comes from?